Hi, welcome back to my series on just talking a little bit about what I consider to be wisdom that was supposed to be shared on the series The Clone Wars, Star Wars The Clone Wars. It was an animated series. And it's not about Star Wars at all. It's just they would make these statements up front on each episode intended to be maybe Yoda-like or some sort of wisdom. And I thought, that'd be an interesting series to do. Like, let's just take each statement and talk about how it might apply to leadership, creating a better life, truth. Does it ring true or not? That kind of thing. Because some of them struck me as like, yeah, that's an insightful statement, and some I thought, what are they talking about? So I wanted to do a series on these. I thought that would be interesting, just for a quick little thoughts on wisdom, if you will. All right, so we're on episode 3 here, and episode 3, the statement that's made at the top of the show is, easy is the path to wisdom for those not blinded by ego. Okay, so on its face value, I'd say that's a very true statement, right? So those that don't have their ego in the way, they can learn from things around them and become more adroit at working with people and understanding the world in a deeper sense. Understanding that there are generalities to human beings, even though we are individuals and we are unique, there are generalities about humanity. And understanding those generalities without judging people, like in a sense of judging them poorly because they don't hold up to some standard. I'm just talking about understanding in general, people do certain things, right? And one of those really fundamental things, just to give you an idea of like kind of where I'm going here, is we all need to eat. So eating is a thing that humans do, right? I mean, really fundamental, like silly fundamental kind of thing. So anyway, I want to get to, because they're not talking about that, but they are talking about ego. So I wanted to talk about ego in the sense of, well, what is ego? Now, there's tons of books on this subject. I haven't read all of them, but ego can be described different ways. And depending on how far back in history you want to go and how detailed you want to go, it could be, there's the difference between the ego and the id. There's ego and confidence. There's all kinds of delineations people make. And I'm not here to debate any of those and say which one I think is correct or any of that, because I think they all have their place in explaining this human condition we all live under, so to speak. So I think ego right now, what this one's getting at is just the ego of self-pretentiousness or non-humility, right? Someone who thinks of themselves more highly than others. I think that's, in that last one for sure is speaking to this statement, right? Wisdom, easy is the path to wisdom for those that are not blinded by ego, right? So blinded by ego is an interesting way to put it, right? So people that have a higher self-importance in their life don't necessarily see it as a blinder. They see it as a strength. And it can be in certain situations when you need to take charge and you need to just, this is what we're going to do. Healthy ego can be really good in that situation. Where it's not as healthy is when you aren't in control or don't need to take control and still feel that you have to, right? That's where the ego can get in your way, where you think your way is the best way no matter what. That's where it blinds you. And I think that's what they're talking about. I'm pretty sure that is what they're talking about. And that's fairly easy to see. I think it's a fairly common thing to notice in others. It's more difficult to notice it for yourself. And so one sign of wisdom or maturity, or both, is to have looked at your ego to say, hey, what did I really think about that? Was I really focused on the most important thing, or was it about me? So when it's all about you, you lose track of important messages around you. You're less apt to take in stimuli that can help you understand what's going on, right? And that's where the blinder thing comes from. I'm trying to make it very close connection between the two rather than just be all theoretical. I think it's that simple. I don't think it's really complicated, which is nice, right? We don't have to go really deep into this whole thing to understand what they're getting at. And wisdom has a lot to do with understanding how things work in the world. Now, there's other parts to wisdom, and we could, talk at length about what wisdom means to different people. But for today, I'm going to go with that because it does cover what I believe they're getting at, right? To understand how things work, how to work with people, how to see the correct path in front of you, so to speak, or the most beneficial path to those around you and you, or the path that creates the most opportunities for what you're doing, or how to best make the situation more synergistic so everyone can combine their efforts and it becomes greater than the parts, right? So I think, being able to see those things and bring about those things in others, that is wisdom. That's one part of wisdom that I think is very important. And those that are great leaders tend to foster those kinds of thinking and ways of being often. So to do that, right, you've got to, and this is the statement, right, you've got to get your ego out of there. It's got to be about other people. Now, your ideas are certainly valid and worth contributing, and they're part of the opportunity or the situation or the what you're trying to create. So it's not that you negate yourself, right? That's not the point to this, right? So if you always are self-deprecating and never take into account your own, that's not wisdom per se, I don't think. Now, it's better to listen than talk all the time. That shows a sign of maturity and wisdom. And so I think there are behaviors that kind of lend themselves to this, to get the ego out of the way, which is open your ears, close your mouth. Right? I've heard it said a number of times, and many of you have heard this, but, we were built with 2 ears and 1 mouth. Maybe we should act accordingly. I think there's a lot of wisdom even in that statement right there. People that I've noticed in life that are more wise, more mature, more able to create that synergistic relationship with others, listen. Really listen. And try to understand what other people are trying to say, what they're trying to get at, have them clarify, ask questions, instead of comparing it to their own opinion and seeing how it matches up. Now, you may do that as part of the process, but that's not the point to a conversation for people that are dipping into this high level of working with others, wisdom, like a high level of wisdom and maturity. I think it's just telling to me when people that exhibit that are often great leaders. I don't know if it's 100%, but it's really high. It's a high percentage. So I strive to shoot for that. I strive to listen more. I try to understand what people are saying. I'm not trying to interpret everything, but I'm trying to read where it's coming from. What's the intention? What kind of what kind of conversation are they trying to create? And how can I best work with that, so to speak, or help that along? And if I can, great. If I can't, and we just don't, we don't see eye to eye on what we're talking about, okay, well, let's part ways. It's okay. Right? We don't have to work together all the time. Now, that being said, that doesn't include when you do have to work with others, right? In a job situation. Let's say you're in your job and you've got a boss that you just butt heads all the time. Well, you got to work with them, right? But coming at it from the standpoint of listening to where they're coming from rather than fighting with what they're coming from can offer a lot of peace in the relationship and actually gain a lot of respect and trust with you and that boss. You may not agree with them, but if you listen and try to understand where they're coming from, at least go that far and do that. That is wise. That's a wise way to approach that situation because you're going to work with them. Now, if it's untenable, great, then maybe another place of work is better for you. Right? And that's not an easy answer, but if it's really not going to work, okay. Well, and that in and of itself, understanding that you cannot change that other person, and if it's not going to work, you cannot bridge that gap, and you've tried repeatedly, and you've tried all kinds of different ways of listening and asking questions and etc., and it just isn't, it's just not going to happen. Okay, well, it's time to move on. There are opportunities in this world, and if you begin to not worry about being right about every situation, you begin to see more of those opportunities. And again, that dips into this wisdom and maturity that I'm speaking of. So I've gone a little bit beyond the statement, but that's the picture that I see when people bring up wisdom. That's the kind of stuff that I think about. And it's really served me well in a lot of my relationships. And it's been a standard that I can look at when things didn't work out, how it broke down, and it relates to what I'm talking about. That didn't happen on my end. I didn't do the listening at the level that I'm talking about. I didn't listen to them. I didn't ask them to clarify where they're coming from. I assumed way too much, and it broke down. So in that sense, in the relationships that I've had that I have broken down, I failed. And so I'm just trying to move forward and not repeat that mistake. I'm trying to learn from that mistake and move forward. So the more we listen, get our ego out of the way, the more we exhibit wisdom. And I think that's where this statement really does hit the mark. So that's my thoughts on it. Thanks a lot for checking it out, and I hope to meet you sometime. If you got any questions, let me know. Reach out and let me know if there's anything I can do for you. Have a fantastic day.